We good, Jeremy? All right. Thanks for sticking around for Bible class. You might be saying, well, who is this guy again? Sorry you have to hear my voice for so long this morning, but Daniel has done some great work in preparation for these classes, and I've really enjoyed the study so far, so I'm excited to get, I guess it depends on what theme you're looking at, but possibly the main event of the book of Judges. We're going to get a few chapters here, 4 chapters on the subject of Samson, who actually is one of the most written about individuals in the Bible. Not the most, not in the top 3 probably, but we know a lot about Samson and his conception and his parents' story, and we're going to get into that here in a second. So I'm excited to look at Judges chapter 13 with you as well today. So these are the goals of the class, and I won't claim them as my own, but I will claim them in the sense that I think they're applicable goals for us to pursue in this study and to look for throughout the book of Judges. When we've talked about the cycle of sin, every time we want to acknowledge what the generations of the time of the Judges could have done to cultivate trust and try to apply those things in our lives, in our children's lives, and we want to see the desperate nature of our life as we live it by our own rules. We're going to jump through these really quickly, not because they're unimportant, but because I have 3 chapters assigned to me this morning with various topics throughout on the subject of Samson. But Daniel's objectives are clear. We want to be able to list all of the judges, and there's these 2 extra leaders, and try to name some events, some special circumstances around each judge and the enemy. And then we wanted to describe the 4-part sin cycle. I've got a new one for you on that one. And, get some of the basic facts and be able to recite Judges 21, 25. We'll probably get to spend a little more time on some of these things on Wednesday and some of the more philosophical talking points about Samson. This morning we are going to try to get to the facts. I gave you the answer. Who is our first judge? And the enemy? Mesopotamia. And he was kind of the knight in shining armor. I know Daniel has given you a unique fact, different each class. I'm not going to do this this time. Maybe I'll get you one in there for Wednesday. The next judge was Ehud. Does anybody remember who he was up against? Moabites and King Eglon. An interesting fact. You can't forget this one, right? Left hand, there's a good one on the chart. I won't mention Daniel's others. We'll save that for another time. Shamgar, he fought the Philistines, and maybe he wasn't even an Israelite. Deborah and Bayrack fought the Canaanites. Bayrack was this great general, went up against a great general, Sisera, and what happened? A woman kills instead of him. The chariots get caught in the rain, and God delivers them. We talk a lot about the downward spiral from here. I know there's more judges that we probably need to add to that slide. Not probably, that aren't noted on that slide. But we've talked a lot about this cycle of sin. And I've been challenged, I'll be honest, I've been challenged with Daniel's view on this. And I'm embracing it, honestly. I think he said something on Wednesday that spoke to me, is the intent of the writer. The intent of the writer was not to necessarily glorify these men. There may be things worth glorifying, but that's not the point of the writer who wrote Judges. The point of the writer was to show that verse in 21:5, that everyone did what was right in his own eye, in their own eyes, right? And so you kind of, if you put the topics here, and certainly we're going to see some really wretched things about Samson through this study, you can kind of see how this cycle degraded down from Deborah and Bayrack all the way down through Absalom and Jephthah and down to Samson. Samson is our 12th judge. Did I just cut out the cycle of sin? I guess I did. I don't know how I did that. I am better at PowerPoint than I'm showing off this morning, but bear with me. We'll get right into it then. The cycle of sin, obviously, I learned it with a rhetoric device, pneumatic device with the R's, and that was rebellion, retribution, repentance, and restitution. So Daniel, I know you didn't like the S ones. Daniel is listening. He texted me about my wizard comment. I don't know how much he's focusing this morning, but texting during church. I just can't lay off of Daniel. He knows I love him. And so anyway, Daniel, if you're listening, there's an R version of that device to remember the cycle of sin. And certainly we see that here, although, if we look at Judges 13, verse 1, it says, the people of Israel did what was evil in the sight of the Lord, so the Lord gave them into the hand of the Philistines for 40 years. No great explanation about idols. I think there's probably no question. We go back to chapters 3, and we see it later in the text. The idols were involved, and idols is the quickest way to get God to bring someone up against you. That's all we get from this text on what the people were doing. The rest of this is really about Samson and his family. And I like this map because, I don't know, is this a laser? Yeah. You see this green dotted line right down the middle here, and this shows the area that the Philistines had taken over. And you got Judah down here in green, and you've got Dan up here in blue, and we'll learn that Samson is from the tribe of Dan. If you go, is it the beginning of chapter 2 or chapter 3, you'll learn that the Philistines actually drove the people of Dan up, and we think north, but you can see the topographical nature of this map. Up actually means up into the hills. So they were pushing out, and everybody wanted the valleys because they were so fertile. They were pushing the people of Dan up. And from the other side, you had Amorites attacking the tribe of Benjamin from the other direction. And actually, at some points, the people of Dan didn't even exist in their territory. Some would argue that Zorah, the town we're going to read about today, and was originally dedicated to the tribe of Judah. Again, we see when the remnant returns in Ezra and Nehemiah, that this town is given to the tribe of Judah. However, today we're going to read about it as a place where the Danites lived. And that's because of this persecution had drove them up into the hills, and their neighbors, the Judeans, must have allowed them to inhabit some of these cities on the border in order to make a home. So I thought this map is really good. We're going to come back to it a couple of times. I think for scale, you can see down here, this map is probably 45 or 50 miles across. So we're not talking about a huge area, although it looks like it. And with that context, I think we can get into the story. There's 3 chapters. I debated this. Am I going to cut the text up, cherry pick verses? I think I'm going to go with Daniel's mode of just reading through the chapter. The narrative speaks so much for itself, and so it's worth the 12 minutes or so throughout the class we'll spend on it. Judges chapter 13, verse 1. And the people of Israel again did what was evil in the sight of the Lord. So the Lord gave them into the hand of the Philistines for 40 years. There was a certain man of Zorah, the tribe of the Danites, whose name was Manoah, and his wife was barren and had no children. And the angel of the Lord appeared to the woman and said to her, Behold, you are barren and have not borne children, but you shall conceive and bear a son. Therefore, be careful and drink no wine or strong drink, and eat nothing unclean. For behold, you shall conceive and bear a son. No razor shall come upon his head, for the child shall be a Nazarite to God from the womb, and he shall begin to save Israel from the hand of the Philistines." Then the woman came and told her husband, "A man of God came to me, and his appearance was like the appearance of the angel of God, very awesome. I did not ask him where he was from, and he did not tell me his name, but he said to me, 'Behold, you shall conceive and bear a son. So then drink no wine or strong drink, and eat nothing unclean, for the child shall be a Nazarite to God from the womb to the day of his death.' Then Manoah prayed to the Lord and said, 'O Lord, please let the man of God whom you sent come again and teach us what we are to do with the child who is born.' And God listened to the voice of Manoah, and the angel of God came to the woman as she sat in the field. But Manoah, her husband, was not with her. So the woman ran quickly and told her husband, 'Behold, the man who came to me the other day has appeared to me.' And Manoah arose and went after his wife and came to the man and said to him, 'Are you the man who spoke to this woman?' And he said, 'I am.' And Manoah said, 'Now, when your words come true, what is to be the child's manner of life? And what is his mission?' And the angel of the Lord said to Manoah, 'Of all that I said to the woman, let her be careful. She may not eat of anything that comes from the vine, neither let her drink wine or strong drink, or eat of any unclean thing. All that I have commanded her, let her observe.' Manoah said to the angel of the Lord, 'Please, let us keep you for a while and prepare a young goat for you.' And the angel of the Lord said to Manoah, 'If you detain me, I will not eat of your food. But if you prepare a burnt offering, then offer it to the Lord.' For Manoah did not know yet that he was an angel of the Lord. And Manoah said to the angel of the Lord, 'What is your name, so that when your words come true, we may honor you?' And the angel of the Lord said to him, 'Why do you ask my name, seeing it is wonderful?' So Manoah took the young goat with the grain offering and offered it on the rock to the Lord, to the one who works wonders. And Manoah and his wife were watching. And when the flame went up toward heaven from the altar, the angel of the Lord went up in the flame of the altar. Now Manoah and his wife were watching, and they fell on their faces to the ground. And the angel of the Lord appeared no more to Manoah and to his wife. Then Manoah knew that he was an angel of the Lord. And Manoah said to his wife, 'We shall surely die, for we have seen God.' But his wife said to him, 'If the Lord had meant to kill us, he would not have accepted a burnt offering and a grain offering at our hands, or shown us these things, or now announced to us such things as these.' And the woman bore a son and called his name Samson. And the young man grew, and the Lord blessed him. And the Spirit of the Lord began to stir within Mahaneh-dan between Zorah and Eshtaol." And that's the chapter. Did you know there was so much written about Samson that didn't mention Samson? I don't think I had paid attention to this whole chapter here that really is the background story for Samson. But you got all my questions at once. I guess another sign of my awesome PowerPoint presentation here. But what are some patterns? We've talked a lot about patterns in this class that you see from biblical examples before and after this story. We do have a mic coming around. If you want to say something quick, shout it out. If you've got a real answer, Justin will come to you with a mic. But what are some of the patterns that we see in this story from other stories? Does it make you think of any other? Mary? Yeah, there's parts for sure. Hannah, that's one I had. I didn't have Mary. I did have her cousin Elizabeth, but I'll put Mary in there. Hannah. Anybody else? Sarah. I had one more. Rachel. So there's definitely those patterns start to emerge here, and actually this feels a lot like Sarah, right? Abram and Sarah. Sarai. Anyway, this feels a lot like that. There's some differences. There's some peculiar differences. I think one of the things is that the angel, or in Genesis with Abram, allows himself to eat of a feast. Abram says, "You're my guest. Let me feed you." And I really don't know why this angel of the Lord cannot be allowed to partake with Manoah here. I just thought that was an interesting oddity from the pattern. But this is not the first time it's happened, and I think we see a lot of meaning behind those parallels. So how did Manoah's wife originally refer to the visitor? We have the context, the benefit of knowing that it was an angel of the Lord, but how did she refer to him? It was man of God, and that probably, you can look at some other contexts, probably meant, yeah, Lee? I think she probably thought it was a prophet, someone that she was unaware of, but nonetheless knew God's work. And we'll spend a few minutes here in a minute talking about the rest of that evolution. But I find it interesting. I have several questions here that aren't on the screen, but is there an important fact? So she goes and tells her husband Manoah, and she leaves out a very important fact, at least in what we're given here. And I don't know if that says something about genders or the roles they play, men and women play in families, but what is the fact that she does not mention to Manoah? His mission is to begin to defeat the Philistines, and we're going to continue to see this idea of Philistines throughout. David will ultimately conquer them, right? But that's not for many years to come. Yeah, Jeremy.
Steve said on there, angel of the Lord showed himself to God and sensed that he did not need a meal, but would accept the sacrificial offering made unto the Lord.
Yeah. So definitely the message that was being presented, the gift that was being given to this barren woman was not the credit or the grace or the wonderfulness of the angel. It was the wonderfulness of the Lord. If anyone was to be praised, I think we definitely see that coming out here, Steve. Thank you. It's the Lord who needs to be praised. Right. So she didn't tell him about the Philistines and that he'd be a great warrior. And it's such a peculiar request. He prays that this angel comes back. And what is the purpose of the second visit? What is his purpose, at least for the second visit? Yeah, teach me. And what a great attitude. Let's just stop for a second and appreciate, there's so many requests by Gideon and all these other guys that we kind of frown and turn our noses up at. What a great request of God. Teach me what to do with this child, right? And I think we would all benefit from an attitude like that. And the angel does come back, and does he say anything new? No. The angel really doesn't say anything different. And it's, again, a peculiar point to me that the Lord is willing to send the angel back a second time and say the same thing, but he makes the point clear. And the only thing I can come up with is, if you look in, and we're not going to spend the time on it because I'm already 20 minutes in, and we're only in the first chapter, but this child is to be a Nazirite. And if you look in Numbers chapter 6, there's 7 verses there that really discuss the tenets of the Nazirite vow. And one of the major things that I noticed, and going back and looking at, is that this was A, self-elected. You put this vow upon yourself, and B, it looks like it was for a very definitive amount of time, not necessarily short, but you can see someone committing to a decade or a year or I don't know, 3 months. And neither of those things are true about this child. So there may have been this element, right, where Manoah was like, wait, you want us to do what now? His whole life, he doesn't get a choice in this? It's his whole life? And I don't know that the angel's instructions, I mean, basically Manoah's wife had to take the vow, so to speak, at least while she was pregnant. I don't know if that says anything about her nature with strong drink and wine before the angel showed up. But I saw Daniel has this friend with some funny cartoons, and the angel came with Manoah's wife, had a big bottle, and like, no more. But nonetheless, the angel repeats himself, and I think it's very clear what the expectations of this child are. Any other thoughts on the story? I guess one of the major points is all of a sudden the angel goes up in the fire and they fall down, and this is such a funny husband and wife conversation that we get a glimpse of here, right? And the husband's freaking out. He's laying prostrate on the ground, and we're going to die. And his wife's like, come on, it's okay. God would not have told us all this. He would not have accepted our... If it's kind of like that mafia movie. If we wanted you dead, you would be dead. Calm down. You see that a lot in some action TV and movies. But that's the tone I get here. Is they were good for each other. It seemed like they helped each other out throughout this story. A few other notes here. I talked about this again. That Zorah, and when we read the name at the end, Mahanadan, it probably means a transient encampment for the Canaanites because they weren't able to live in their own home. Manoah, his name means peace or rest, a place of rest. And I think I've gotten through the rest of these notes here. And I guess, there's some interesting tidbits throughout this chapter. What do you think about Manoah and his wife? You have an impression on them? Yeah? Yeah. Yeah, I think so. And the comment was that God chose these people, right? I think the way we see Manoah react to the angel, the honor he bestows, his willingness to give the sacrifice to the Lord, there certainly is something godly about these people. And we go on to read, we're going to read here at the top of 14, they encourage Samson to do the right thing. And in fact, I think in 16, it acclaims his mother with keeping the Nazirite vow for her son all the days it was under her control. So they certainly took this stuff seriously. I don't think there's a question in my mind that she did right during her pregnancy as the angel requested of her. Any other thoughts or questions about Manoah and his wife here? Good deal. One comment here.
It seems interesting that, at least from what we're told, that they weren't necessarily looking to have a child. I mean, in the case of Hannah, she's praying for a child, and Sarah and Abram were looking for a child, and Rachel was jealous of Leah because she was able to have children. But in this case, we really don't see any instance of them asking for it, or we're told she was barren.
Yeah.
So that was, but in that case, it seems to be very similar to Mary, where out of the blue, they find out we're going to have a child.
Yeah, I hadn't made that tie, so it goes back to Albert's parallel there. Comment over here. Or?
And the purpose given in verse 5 is that he will begin to deliver them from the Philistines. That word for deliver is the same word that you get Yeshua. You get the word Jesus. You get the name for Jesus. So there are a lot of parallels, like Albert was saying, between the story of Mary and Joseph and then the story of Manoah and this unnamed woman to whom there's not a lot of emphasis placed on her identity, but on her character and what she did throughout his life. That's fairly interesting to kind of note some of the similarities but differences. But at the end of the day, the child's purpose was very similar to the purpose of Jesus, to deliver, to rescue, to save from these people.
Absolutely. Thank you all for weaving that into the material. Yeah, Jeremy, one more comment.
Steve also said Manoah's wife was an invaluable source of encouragement for his faith.
Yeah, absolutely. She got orders from God, and she did it. I think that's spot on. So we're going to move into chapter 14, just out of the sake of time. I'm going to leave this map up for just a little bit. This valley of Sorek, extremely fertile. Everybody wanted to grow their crops here. You got Judah down here. You got maybe the Dan original territory up here, and right here on the border, you got somewhere out in the suburbs, you got this transient camp. And then you've got the Philistines who are also trying to grow their crops here. And so we're going to read about Zorah, and we're going to read about Timnah. And if what I've read is at all accurate, this might be a 90-minute walk between the two towns here. And I think that just kind of help. You'll see there's some activity in the middle, and that may help clarify that. So all of a sudden, Samson's grown. We see the stirring. We see the Spirit of the Lord. We've talked about that a few times. And we're going to see the Spirit, and it's going to come on Samson, and it's going to embolden him to do the things that he does. We're going to be critical of Samson, but let us not forget these actions are emboldened by the Spirit of the Lord, as the text says. So Judges 14, verse 1. Samson went down to Timnah, and at Timnah he saw one of the daughters of the Philistines. And then he came up and told his father and mother, I saw one of the daughters of the Philistines at Timnah. Now, get her for me as my wife. But his father and mother said to him, Is there not a woman among the daughters of your relatives or among all our people that you must go to take a wife from the uncircumcised Philistine? But Samson said to his father, Get her for me, for she is right in my eyes. I think we want to focus on Samson's eyes at the beginning of this story and the end of it as we get to Wednesday. Verse 4, his father and mother did not know that it was from the Lord, for he was seeking an opportunity against the Philistines. At that time, the Philistines ruled over Israel. Then Samson went down with his father and mother to Timnah, and they came to the vineyard of Timnah, and behold, a young lion came towards him roaring. Then the Spirit of the Lord rushed upon him, and although he had nothing in his hands, he probably wouldn't have weapons under the rule of the Philistines. Although he had nothing in his hands, he tore the lion in pieces as one tears a young goat. But he did not tell his father or his mother what he had done. Then he went down and talked with the woman, and she was right in Samson's eyes. After some days, he returned to take her. And he turned aside to see the carcass of the lion. And behold, there was a swarm of bees in the body of the lion, and honey. He scraped it out into his hands and went on eating as he went. And he came to his father and mother and gave some to them, and they ate. But he did not tell them that he had scraped the honey from the carcass of the lion. And his father went down to the woman, and Samson prepared a feast there, for so the young men used to do. As soon as the people saw him, they brought 30 companions to be with him. And Samson said to them, Now, let me put on a riddle to you. If you can tell me what it is within the 7 days of the feast, and find it out, then I will give you 30 linen garments and 30 changes of clothes. But if you cannot tell me what it is, then you shall give me 30 linen garments and 30 changes of clothes. And they said to him, Put your riddle, that we may hear it. And he said to them, Out of the eater came something to eat, out of the strong came something sweet. And in 3 days they could not solve the riddle. On the 4th day they said to Samson's wife, Entice your husband to tell us what the riddle is, lest we burn you and your father's house with fire. Have you invited us here to impoverish us? And Samson's wife wept over him and said, "You only hate me. You do not love me. You have put a riddle to my people, and you have not told me what it is." And he said to her, "Behold, I have not told my father nor my mother. Now shall I tell you?" She wept before him. And on the 7th day that their feast lasted, he told her, because she pressed him hard. Then she told the riddle to her people. And the men of the city said to him on the 7th day, before the sun went down, "What is sweeter than honey? And what is stronger than the lion?" And he said to them, "If you had not plowed my heifer, you would not have found out my riddle." And the Spirit of the Lord rushed upon him, and he went down to Ashkelon and struck down 30 men of the town and took their spoil and gave their garments to those who he had told the riddle. In hot anger, he went back to his father's house, and Samson's wife was given to his companion, who had been his best man. Some best man. Going back to this map, I think you'll see a similar layout of Zorah and Timnah right in the middle there. And you can see they go to check out the woman, and I don't mean anything irreverent. That just seems to be the way it was. And then they came back, and somewhere along the way he departed his parents. And you would think if they were traveling a great distance, they wouldn't be separated. But if it was only an hour or 90-minute walk, they might have gone on before bedtime, and he stayed out. Anyhow, I just point that out because it's not that odd in this situation that he was separated from them. And then, all this transpires, and he goes what seems to be about 23 miles down to Ashkelon to kill the people. And we'll talk about that in a minute here, but that's a round trip of nearly 50 miles. The Spirit of the Lord was upon him. Certainly we know these ultra runners today that can do 50 miles at once. But I think there's definitely a reason he goes that distance to collect these garments, right? And so that's something to collect from this map here. A little debate action here, as Daniel likes to do to us all, pit us against one another, brothers and sisters in unity. No, but was Samson wrong to take a Philistine wife? This may be a microphone question if you have an answer. Terry's got a comment over here. Just a second, Terry.
Actually, it was the right decision. It was intended for the Lord so that he would act vengeance against the Philistines, and as it says at the beginning of the chapter.
Definitely in the book. Definitely a true statement. Anybody else have a point? Contradicting point, so to speak? I can get comfortable with silence. Lee?
The use of the phrase, "she is right in my eyes," it parallels the comments where it says that people were doing the things that were right in their own eyes, and the condemnation that falls on the people of Israel.
Yeah. That's definitely in the book. That's definitely a true statement. I agree with you both. I think we see a combination of things working together here for God's will. Sometimes we see in the Old Testament bad people and bad things fulfilling God's will, and good people and good things fulfilling. There's no reason both of those things can't be happening at the same time, right? I think those things are true. So Samson does this great deed. I think if you, let's just put all the notes up there, right? You can read ahead if you feel it. To rent a kid or a goat likely meant, I think all the pictures you see online or the kids' books, you see him ripping his mouth. I think there's some evidence in Deuteronomy that would say you split the kid from the hind legs out. And I don't know enough about butchering to get into that conversation, but it would appear here that Samson took the lion by the hind legs and ripped him open, which is quite a sight to imagine. And then we see him come back to this lion and collect this honey. And so maybe he's lusting after a Philistine. Has he broken the Nazirite vow? Is he really doing what God wants to do to the Judas to do? I don't know. Again, he's touching a dead body here as he collects this honey. he obviously doesn't want his parents to know about it. His mom cares, right? We established that his mom cares about his Nazirite vow. So he touches, there are some writers that would speculate number 6 does not say a dead animal, and that if it were a dead animal, then you couldn't eat meat, so Nazirites would also be vegetarians. I don't know. But nonetheless, Samson was hiding this from his parents, but he touched the carcass of the lion. This had to be sometime, even if it was in the summer, for the carcass to be dried out enough to have a cavity where the bees, and not to mention the bees needed time to build the comb and the honey. So this wasn't the next day or anything, but he comes and he does this deed, I would argue, against his Nazirite vow, and he even gives some to his parents. Maybe a little bit disrespectful here, but we see him do this, and he comes up with this riddle, right? And it just so happens, this works out so nicely. Man, Dan just got up. I'm in trouble. That this rhyme works out in English translation, right? Out of the eater came something to eat, now the strong came something sweet. This sounds really nice, but that was just coincidence, right? In fact, I think we'll see some of these other ones don't have that rhyme and that flow as we get to the next 2 chapters. But was his riddle to the people able to be deciphered? I don't think anybody could know to guess it unless they knew what had happened, right? And so this may be an act of deceit, an act of obvious intention to rip off his companions, right? And so he loses the bet. Whatever Samson had in strength, man, this guy lacked in intelligence, right? What did he think was going to happen? And really, this woman wasn't that smart either. If she knew anything about Samson, it seems like they were scared. These companions, they saw him, and these companions showed up. They were such great companions that his best man married his wife. I think they were scared of Samson, right? This was the bodyguard attachment with the wedding. And if his wife was smart, she would have said, "These companions, they're threatening me and my father. Go kill him," because he certainly could have and certainly would have. Nobody showed a broad amount of understanding of the real situation that was going on here. But he goes all these cities over, right? Why? Because he probably didn't want word coming back that this was the spoils of a terroristic act on the Philistines. And he gets the garments. This is, I won't go into it, but these garments are significant wealth. This is more like saying your Sunday suit than your college jammies that you wore every day in class, right? And so this is a significant investment. And he goes down these 23 miles and back and pays off the debt. And my question was this an adequate return on what he had committed to? Did he fulfill his end of the bet? One might say, well, he just took from one Philistine to the other. He didn't give anything. Maybe he shouldn't have ever made the bet to begin with, but maybe this is the Lord working, to Terry's point earlier, this is the Lord. If we had more than 7 minutes, I would let y'all stew in some silence here, but maybe it's the Lord working through him the bet was a wash in the middle, and the Philistines got what was coming to them down in Ashkelon. And anyway, we could talk some more about this, but it appears the marriage was never consummated. Samson obviously does not realize this as we get into the next chapter, but his wife is given away to his best friend or his best man in the wedding. And that brings us to Judges 15. Let's try to get through the text here real quickly. Dan, if you're listening, give me extra 60 seconds here. After some days, this is 15:1, at the time of the wheat harvest, Samson went to visit his wife. 3 months later is a good time to check in on your spouse. And he said, "I will go to my wife in the chamber." But her father would not allow him to go in, and he told And her father said, I really thought you utterly hated her, so I gave her to your companion. Is not her younger sister more beautiful than she? Please take her instead. And Samson said to them, this time I shall be innocent in regard to the Philistines when I do them harm. So Samson went and caught 300 foxes and took torches and turned them tail to tail and put torch between each pair of tails. And when he had set fire to the torches, he let the foxes go into the standing grain of the Philistines and set fire to the stacked grain and the standing grain, as well as the olive orchard. Then the Philistines said, who has done this? And they said, Samson, the son-in-law of the Timnite, because he has taken his wife and given her to his companions. And the Philistines came up and burned her and her father with fire. Okay, so we got this back and forth, this escalating event. Verse 7, and Samson said to them, if this is what you do, I swear I will be avenged on you. And after that, I will quit. And he struck them hip and thigh with a great blow, and he went down and stayed in the cleft of the rock of Edom. And the Philistines came up and encamped in Judah and made a raid on Lehi. And the men of Judah said, why have you come up against us? Clearly, they hadn't done anything against the Philistines. They said, we have come up to bind Samson to do to him as he has done to us. Then 3,000 men of Judah went down to the cleft of the rock of Edom and said to Samson, do you not know that the Philistines are rulers over us? What then is this that you have done to us? And he said to them, as they did to me, so I have done to them. Oh, this is confusing. And they said to him, we have come down to bind you, that we may give you to the hand of the Philistines. And Samson said to them, swear to me that you will not attack me yourselves. And they said, no, we will only bind you and give you into their hands. We will surely not kill you. So they bound him with 2 new ropes and brought him up from the rock. When he came to Lehi, the Philistines came shouting to meet him. The Spirit of the Lord rushed upon him, and the ropes that were on his arms became as flax that had caught fire, and his bonds melted off his hands. And he found a fresh jawbone of a donkey, and put out his hand and took it, and with it he struck 1,000 men. And Samson said, with the jawbone of a donkey, heaps upon heaps, with the jawbone of a donkey, I have struck down 1,000 men. As soon as he had finished speaking, he threw away the jawbone out of his hand, and that place was called Ramath-Lehi. And he was very thirsty, and he called upon the Lord and said, you have granted this great salvation by the hand of your servant. And shall I now die of thirst and fall into the hands of the uncircumcised? And God split open the hollow place that is at Lehi, and water came out from it. And when he drank, his spirit returned, and he revived. Therefore the name was called En-Hakkore. It is at Lehi to this day. And he judged Israel in the days of the Philistines 20 years. You see this graphic. This is some more of Daniel's friend who has this blog with these comics on here. And I don't know what he smote them hip and thigh with a great slaughter means, but certainly if you think about him ripping a lion from the hind legs, okay, hip and thigh. I don't want to be a Philistine at this juncture here, right?